in it. They were doing it as some sort of who's tougher test. When the teacher sees this and sees they have small scratches on their knuckles, she proceeds to tell them that the big was poisonous and they will die very soon since they drew blood punching the lid. We were maybe 10 at the time. She made them write goodbye notes to their parents and make goodbye speeches to class. We were all tripping because we believed her too. It was wild. Story 2. Middle school. Girl had the sewing machine needle go right through her finger. The left with the needle and thread just hanging out. Another kid had an X-Acto knife stabbed right into his wrist, by accident, so close to the artery. High school. Girl was run over by a bus. It backed over her, then pulled forward over her again. We had fundraisers and pep rallies for her. She made a full recovery and is still playing sports at almost 40 now. Story 3. There was a kid I knew. I'd cower why, or if it was his dad's or grandpa, but the fucker brought a grenade to school to show me. It was when we were leaving school. Guy just opens his backpack and lets me take a look, and sure enough it was there. Story 4. Not saw, but I did experience the aftermath. A kid at our school died once, while out on a school camp. They were way out in the Australian outback. The teachers made barbecue for the kids, and one of the boys, for some reason, ate the food, kebabs, without asking what was in them, even though his parents had filled out his permission form indicating clearly that he had food allergies. Long story short, hardcore anaphylaxis. Throat swelled shut, fell to the ground, foaming. School nurse stabbed him with every single EpiPen they had in the medical kit. Nothing. Nada. Zip. Fuck all happened. Picked him up, threw him in the van, and sped out of the campsite at top speed down the road. They were so far out in the middle of nowhere that there's no phone reception. Can't do anything. Can't call for an ambulance, helicopter, nothing. Finally got to the nearest town, called emergency services. Helicopter arrived, loaded the kid onto it. Started treatment, flew straight back to town. Never made it. Dead before the chopper landed. I was working at the school at the time. I had a job offered by the school to graduates, which I accepted, and found out all the details from the school nurse. Story 5. Bright and early in the morning as many kids are arriving to school. Pretty popular guy comes running through the crowd, chased by a group of 3 other dudes. A little bit of space opens up for them to run through, but all of a sudden one of the chasers stops, pulls out a gun, and fires 3 right into his back. Murdered, right in front of a significant chunk of students. Very sad. Story 6. In 1981 I was in grade 4 and we had a sadistic teacher. She'd beat us for any reason. The worst I saw were 2 incidents. The first was when she caned a boy on his palm. She thrashed his hand until the skin broke and blood gushed out. The second was when she called a boy up to the blackboard to solve a maths problems. Poor boy was so terrified he froze. She grabbed him by the neck and smashed his head against the blackboard several times. She regularly did this to him and eventually he ended up in hospital with a serious concussion. She taught there for many years and no one ever did anything about her. This was in South Africa and back then teachers were considered untouchable by most parents. If you came home complaining that a teacher hit you, you'd probably get another thrashing because the teacher was always right. She's dead by now and I hope she's burning in the deepest reaches of hell. Story 7. This is going back 20 years. Freshman year, a girl in my class sent nudes to her sophomore boyfriend. The entire student body had them within a month. The kids were absolutely ruthless in mocking her. It led to her developing an eating disorder. She missed the rest of the year for inpatient treatment. Story 8. A milder version of this happened in my school. My friend was of slight build, raised in Germany, born in Italy, perfect target for bullying in my small Midwestern town to where his family had unfortunately transplanted. One big dude who fancied himself a cowboy, who wore boots with spurs and had a plug of chaw in his mouth at all times, bullied a lot of kids. He would intimidate my friend, yell at him, make fun of his accent, etc., and get in his face, push him around. My friend was actually a little on the impulsive and wild side. He just totally hid that side of himself in school, mainly because of the relentless bullying. Anyway, one day he had had enough, suddenly jumped on this cowboy's back like a goddamn gazelle, grabbed his head as they both headed for the floor, and proceeded to smack this guy's head into the concrete a couple of times. Thank God a hall monitor was nearby and pulled him off. I thought for sure he was going to kill him. My friend got a lot of detention but no charges were filed by the family because I think they knew what a sadistic fuck they had raised. Kid came back to school after a week looking bruised up. Didn't bully another kid again. Story 9. In the final year of high school, I was sat next to a kid who had been named Pee-wee since day 1 of school. He was introduced to me as this, and never corrected me on his name or said not to call him that or ever made out it was offensive in any way to him. I tend not to ask questions so just went with it. On that final day, I asked him why they called him that. It turns on one of the first days of school, somebody noticed he had some of that luminescent yellow coloring, like from noodles or certain Indian foods, on his shirt and one kid called him Pee-wee piss stains. I did ask him why he never said anything but he didn't really care. although I felt bad for calling him that for the entirety of high school. Story 10. Back in 3rd grade, 1997, a classmate of mine was acting out. I'm not sure if our teacher was in a bad mood or this was accepted behavior back in the day, but he made the troubled student come up the front of the classroom. He then grabbed this kid by neck, pinned him against the wall, and proceeded to lift him up off the ground as high as he could. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do remember our teacher saying, "I could kill you if I wanted to, but not today," as he dropped him. Story 11. This seriously terrible girl who always smelled bad and screamed at people that she was a witch and she'd curse you kept bugging my buddy to sell her as Ritalin. He told her no a whole bunch of times, but finally about a week before the school year ended he needed money for something and finally agreed. She immediately went to the administration, who called the police, and he was both expelled and ended up in juvie. As far as I know, she's still an insufferable piece of trash almost 30 years later. Story 12. Some guy in college sat in front of me in a studio. We were on stools so there was no back to the chair. He had his phone in his back pocket, screen facing out with rough adult content playing on his phone. He had his headphones on. I wasn't the only one who noticed, but I certainly didn't want to break the silence by telling him. Story 13. I was attending a community college at the time, and we were waiting for the professor to come in before class. One dude probably in his 40s sat at the back with the monitor against the wall so we could all see that he was intently looking at a threesome with ads flashing all around his screen. I'm still wondering what was up with him. Maybe a porn addiction? Story 14. In grade 2, my teacher made all students step on a child as they walked into class because he left his lunchbox on the steps in front of the class. This child was mixed race, and this was in the 80s and in apartheid South Africa. Those who refused got hit with a cane for not listening to their teacher. Supremely messed up, and I will never forget it. She was fired a year or two later for various messed up things. 15. I went to kindergarten in the late 80s in America. My teacher was this horrible old woman who would get in your face and scream at you for the smallest of reasons. One time I asked her if I could go to the bathroom and she said no. I asked again a little bit later and again she said no. I ended up having an accident and had to let her know. I was sent to the office to wait for my parents to bring a change of clothes. My teacher decided the best course of action would be to march the whole class past the administration offices where I was seated and have them all point and laugh at me. I sometimes think about Googling her name and finding the cemetery she's buried in so I can go piss on her grave. That shit has lived with me for 35 years and is only slightly less embarrassing than when I decided in 1st grade to read my love poem to my crush in front of the whole class. Even the teacher tried to stop me and save me from myself. Story 16. My 1st grade teacher in 1990s America used to take any kid who did anything bad and have the whole class circle around them while the accused sat in a chair in the middle and everyone would have to confront them about it. Why did you do it? I don't want to be friends with someone like you. Etc. While the kid just sat in the center crying and saying sorry again and again. If the other kids in the circle didn't want to say something, she'd coax it out of them. She'd get the other kids riled up and angry, and push them until they lashed out at the kid in the center and said something. It was fucked up. My parents were pissed. She kept on doing it though, to other kids too. I learned just this year that this same tactic was popular in all those troubled youth boarding schools that infamously abused children. I feel like she must have gotten it from reading about those back when those were considered innovative and new. Story 17. My gym teacher also taught health education. He would sit at the front of the class in his mesh shorts and no boxers and teach us about sex education. His Rick would sometimes be visible. We had a class of 40 boys and 6 girls, and apparently us girls were pretty naive cause we all brushed it off as a repetitive accident. In hindsight, as an adult, that asshole was showing his penis to teenagers on purpose and we were all too dumb and scared to realize. He was really handsy in the gym too. It's not the worst story but still super gross. Story 18. I also had a PE teacher that was too handsy, 9 to 12 at the time. I said his name once when talking to my sister who was in high school and she's like, WTF. He was my PE teacher last year too, but he got fired for being inappropriate. They moved him to the elementary school? Ooh, yep. Story 19. Gym teachers seem to have a high instance of creep/pedophile. 1 year we had a new student move in mid-year during the gymnastics units and the one gym teacher was handsy with girls, allegedly, trying to show them proper technique. She fucking slapped him across the face and told him not to ever touch her, or any other girl, without explicit permission. They tried to suspend her, but apparently the reason her family moved is she was a survivor of sexual assault at her old school and they wanted a fresh start. And they'd go right to the news with the story if that's how the school wanted to play it. School backed down. That gym teacher was noticeably more hands-off whenever she was in the class. As a guy I didn't really notice it because he wasn't handsy with us. But after that incident people paid more attention and yeah, dude was a fucking creep. Story 20. Was anyone else's PE teacher's offices located directly in the locker rooms? In middle school, I had both female and male gym teachers. Each of their offices were located in the female and male locker rooms, with windows, where we all changed. With only so much time to change and only so many stalls, many people changed out in the open, which is normal for locker rooms. Female PE teacher would be in her office. After a bit, a black curtain went up on the windows. If I remember, I think she was caught looking at the girls change. Story 21. Gym teachers. At my school we had one who would give the girls extra credit for wearing pigtails to class. As teens we were like whatever and would actually do it if we didn't feel like running the mile or whatever that day. As an adult I am super grossed out. Another one was rumored to have waited until after graduation to have sex with the senior girl he was secretly dating. She was 2 or maybe 3 years above me. I have no idea if it was true, but it was definitely plausible. Story 22 was in computer class and the dude next to me, who was a big Bible thumper, was masturbating into his Bible. He got suspended for a week. A week later walked into the library and he was in there crying while masturbating into his Bible again. Story 23 once saw a teacher fully dump out a teenage girl's bag because he was convinced she stole one of his pens. Exposing her pads, tampons, phone, hairbrush, etc. Also her diary, which some random kid picked up and started reading out loud while laughing. Exposing her life at home where her mom and dad are mentally abusive towards her. All the kids made fun of her and the teacher was just screaming her about a freaking pen. She ran out and about 20 minutes later the teacher found the pen under his papers. She transferred schools.